Hi, everybody. I wanted to walk through with you the beach chair ordinance proposal that I had put together for our meeting on the subject, which I'm happy to say successfully passed. I had talked to quite a few of the stakeholders, including the residents, the hotels on the ocean, and the condominium owners on the ocean. Basically, those were the three groups that I was most interested in speaking to. What we've got in the first picture is a picture here of our beautiful beach. It's a typical day. The picture was taken probably a week ago, which would have been early September, on a weekday. And as you can see, the beaches are pristine. Now, of course, this is during the COVID crisis, and there are some restrictions, but people are going to the beach. So it's not empty because nobody's going. It's empty because we've got an amazing opportunity. We've got our own Central Park right there out on the ocean. So the object of the game here is to preserve it for the residents and for all of our grandchildren coming along. What is the context and the predicate for this ordinance? As far as I was concerned, it was number one, that Surfside residents come first, and number two, there are stakeholders in this process, and those stakeholders are all Surfside residents, oceanfront property owners, condominium owners on the ocean and off the ocean, and hotel owners on the ocean. What is the basis for a fair apportionment of the beach access for stakeholders? Well, in my opinion, number one, residents, beachfront condominiums, and hotels should be treated equally and have equal access to the beach. Now, that wasn't the proposal brought forward by another one of our commissioners when this matter first was discussed, but that was my opinion at that particular meeting, and I think that at least everybody else has come along to that way of thinking. Number two, there should be unobstructed corridors, setbacks for traversing the beach along the dune, which would be north and south, along the water, which would be north and south, and on the north and south property lines for each property, which would be east and west. Those setbacks, if you can imagine them, would form a box around an area on the beach behind each property. We'll call that the setback box. Number three, within the designated setback area, for the purposes of this discussion, residents should be apportioned 50% of the space, and beachfront condominiums and hotels should be apportioned the other 50%. Now, as I just said before, those setback lines behind each property form a box, a rectangle, if you will, of space. Once you take out the walking areas in and out of the water and north and south on the beach, both by the dune and by the water, you're left with that property line. And my thought process there was, I would like to see residents represented in 50% of that box, and the condominiums and hotels on the ocean represent the other 50% on that box. Number four talks about street ends. The street ends are the numbered streets starting at 88th and going up to 96. Street ends all have corridors that extend from the hard pack to the water and at a width equal to the width of the walk area from the hard pack to the street. So that means there'll be an area that will have no chairs, no obstructions, and people will be able to come in and go out without walking or falling over people. Number five, the next slide is a graphical representation of the corridor setbacks, and note the resultant area, which is that sort of box behind each property that we talked about. And before we look at the pictures, I want to let you know that in those pictures, you're going to see pairs of beach chairs. And each one of those pairs of beach chairs covers an area that's 12 by 12, which is basically the size of a medium small bedroom. Here we're looking at a depiction of several properties on the ocean, different size properties, 150 foot, 200 foot, and 100 foot frontages. And as you can see, those arrows are depicting the setback areas where there are no chairs allowed for people to walk around. And then you've got on the left and the right, you've got the street ends, which are, of course, there to allow people to come in and out of the beach with unobstructed access. Now, of course, we're not going to be allowing this many chairs on the beach, but it was just an idea to give you the box that we'll be dealing with. So what are the possible chair configurations? The original proposal to only allow the oceanfront condominiums a rate of 0.1 chair per lineal foot was unfair and unworkable. That rate meant that if you had 10 feet of beach frontage, that you could only have one chair every 10 feet. On the other hand, the proposal made by this particular commissioner allowed hotels to have 4 chairs. No, 0.25 chairs would be in 10 feet, 2.5 chairs in 10 feet. Okay, so you either had 1 chair in 10 feet or you had 2.5 chairs in 10 feet. Treating each oceanfront property equally is fair, workable, and practical, which is what I recommended. Number 4, the following breakdown outlines the possible configurations. As you can see in this analysis, what you've got is you've got the original proposal there on the left, and it shows you basically for each property what the original proposal would have yielded as far as chairs go. The others to the right are different variations, but the significance of what you see on the right is that it treats the hotels and the condos equally. So, for instance, at the Grand Beach, if you look at number 23 down there and you go across, the original proposal was to allow for 50 chairs. What eventually happened was we went with a proposal that I recommended, which was 0.3, which allowed 60 chairs. So they got 10 more chairs than they would have otherwise had under the initial proposal. But the significance is the condos. If you took the last condo on the ocean, the Solomar, you could see that the original proposal gave them 40 chairs for their gigantic building, which was unreasonable and unfair. They now will be allowed 120 chairs, and if they need more chairs for some reason, they are allowed, pursuant to the terms that I supported, to reach out to the manager and ask for an exception. The next slides are going to address the that's a misspelling. They're going to address what number of chairs may work on the beach. Cap and trade, what is it? First, let's look at what the largest number is, which is consistent with the principle laid out in the earlier presentation. Okay, we looked at a couple different rates. This 0.4% 4 rate would be in 10 feet, you would have 4 chairs. It's 0.4 chairs per foot. So in 10 feet, you'd have 4 chairs. So that, again, that's a pretty good number. It's not a high number, but it's not a low number. And this is basically what that configuration would look like. You can see the building with the 200 footage frontage would have 80 chairs. If we go to the next slide, it's the same picture, but what's happened is the hotel with the 200-foot frontage has traded with the adjoining property owners, and they've reduced their numbers, and he's increased his number, but the overall number has not increased, which was the idea behind the cap and trade. The next picture shows you the cap and trade at a little bit of a reduced rate, 0.375. It's not a significant reduction, but it's just there to show you what the difference would be. Here's another depiction of the Grand Beach at 0.375 chairs per foot, meaning for every 10 feet you had almost 4 chairs. And as you can see in the picture, that is the amount of chairs that they would be putting out behind their property. Now, what ultimately happened at the meeting was that the rate that was adopted was lower than that, and it was 0.3. So the number of chairs behind the Grand Beach will be less than what you're seeing there. This is the Four Seasons, and as you can see, they've got quite a long piece of property here. And as a result, they've got, quite a large number of chairs fronting this property. Now, of course, the hotel is in the middle there, and then you've got the condominiums on the left and the right side. And in this picture, it shows much, much larger setbacks, as you can see on the right and on the left. The normal setbacks would be 20 feet. And you can see there on the left and the right, you see that 20-foot number. And then you see there's another setback, which is much larger. Now, those chairs should be spread into that first setback, but not into the outside setback. So the result would be probably just 2 rows of chairs in front of the Four Seasons Hotel. And as you can see, that would leave 50% of the beach empty for residents who wanted to come out and enjoy the beach in front of the Four Seasons, should they wish to do so. There was other discussions. The hotels had asked for permission to be able to have a vehicle bring chairs out and bring chairs in. That is not a popular position, and in order to discuss that, I put this particular slide in there, which basically said, should there be vehicles on the beach, and if so, what would be the alternatives, or if not, rather, what would be the alternatives that were possible. One of the beach properties suggested that one, we have the chairs, because we're going to have a staging area for chairs out on the beach, and in order to make that staging area disappear, they recommended, and I thought was a good idea, to have a tarp that would go over those chairs that would look like, would have a theme like you're seeing here in these 2 slides. That staging area, which did pass, was not to exceed 4 feet in height, and number 3, would not exceed 1 row within the setbacks that we talked about earlier, those areas where people can circulate around where the chairs are. Some of the beach chair operators had asked for overnight storage, and had offered to use these tarps as covers for the overnight storage. Lastly, what are the other considerations to make this beach chair ordinance complete? Well, number 1, the weekend parking fees at 94th Street lot should be raised to $10 an hour. We want to make the beach attractive to our residents, our guests, our hotels on the ocean. We don't necessarily want to become a center for parties and large numbers of people from outside of Surfside coming into Surfside to use our beaches. We're not set up for that. We don't have the lifeguards to do that. And I think raising the parking fees to $10 an hour would address that issue. Number 2, strict code enforcement on the beach. No boom boxes, no barbecuing, no glass bottles, etc. Number 3, permit fees generated from this ordinance are used to fund the purchase, operation, and maintenance of new chairs and umbrellas at the community center for the use of our residents. We'll be generating quite a bit of funding from the annual permits related to this ordinance, and I would not want to see that money going into the general administration of the city. Rather, I'd rather see the money be used for the purchase, operation, and maintenance of new chairs and umbrellas that our residents could use at our community center. Number 4, the cap and trade agreements, which did not pass at the meeting. I had recommended be registered at Town Hall so they could be effective. That's a non-issue at this point. And lastly, no parking, no drop-offs in front of oceanfront condominiums. And that would be strictly enforced because we've got, again, people coming from out of town, blocking the entrances to our condos, unloading beach stuff that really shouldn't be done in that area.